meeting is being recorded.
Hey guys, my name is Vento. I'm on with Dennis S. I can't pronounce his last name, so I will definitely let him do that for you guys. But this purpose of this call and this podcast is to discuss mental health and law enforcement. You know, Dennis and I were having a conversation the other day about our own journeys in law enforcement, but with mental health specifically, and talking about our own individual struggles and what we went through. And, you know, each journey is specific and unique to each person. You know, law enforcement is a fickle beast, and it impacts us all in different ways. No matter what role you hold, what agency you work at, what location you're in, whether you're in the US, whether you're working internationally at some other agency, law enforcement is a special community. And the challenges and problems and incidents and issues that we face in law enforcement while trying to do a good job for our respective communities, it impacts us in very specific ways. And how we choose to address that trauma in our own professional and personal lives is absolutely crucial to who we are after law enforcement as well. You know, after we leave, we go to the corporate world and we retire, but we still carry those scars with us, you know, and we still carry those invisible wounds, if you will. And some of us do a really good job of dealing with it, and some of us don't. And the purpose of this podcast is really just to explore Dennis's journey. You know, what has worked for him? What hasn't worked for him? What does he still struggle with? You know, and what resources has he used to come to grips with his own internal demons, you know, that he has walked with and is still walking with to this day. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the floor over to Dennis. Dennis, if you can just introduce yourself and give a brief background about where you are, and then we'll jump into the meat of this.
Yeah, sure. Eric, thanks. I appreciate you getting us together to do this. This is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. So I'm Dennis Szentmariay. I have been a law enforcement officer for 25 years. I have not only been a police officer, but I've been in every part of the first responder world. I've been a medic. I've been a firefighter prior to becoming a police officer. I've worked in a couple of different states as a law enforcement officer, and had a really good career. I'm a senior detective, so I got to do a lot of investigations. I got to do a lot of fun stuff. You know, I like to say the job was a lot of fun, but there was also some that wasn't fun. And that's the part I really want to talk about. And I think it's the elephant in the room for any first responder. You know, nobody wants to talk about, you know, the deep, bad, dark stuff that we hide away. And, you know, we try and be the tough, you know, outside, but on the inside, you know, sometimes you hurt. So I wanted to share that. So with my journey, it was really unique on how I came about with some trauma. It started out before my police career. So I'm going to talk about that, and then I'm going to say how it transitioned into that. So back in 1995, I was a medic with a volunteer ambulance company, and I was driving an ambulance, and I was transporting a patient to the hospital, and I was running lights and sirens through an intersection, and a car failed to stop going through the intersection and hit the ambulance. I was driving at about 70 miles an hour. It flipped the ambulance over, slid across the intersection 150 feet. Had two crew members in the back. It was a bad situation. I was in my early 20s. I mean, I was young, you know. I loved doing what I did. And when everything's all said and done, the person that hit the ambulance had died. They had a medical event that caused them to go unconscious, reason why they hit the ambulance. My two crew members were fine. The patient was fine. I like to say I was fine physically, but mentally I was not. So being a young guy, first accident I was ever in, never in any other accident before. cracked the chassis of the ambulance. I mean, the impact was hard, hit right behind the driver's side door. Luckily, I had my seatbelt on. I made it through. After that, I was fine. I said, you know what? I'm good. No problems. Well, shortly after that, I started experiencing some nightmares. And, then lawsuits started coming. I was being sued for millions of dollars. Had to go to a safety hearing in New York State to see if my license would be suspended if I was at fault for the accident. So a lot of emotions going on. I got interviewed by homicide detectives, because of the incident. All this stuff, it was before my law enforcement career. I didn't know what was going on. So got through all of that, shut down, hit it. Took it all and just put it in the back of my head and said, I'm not going to talk about it. Well, that didn't work. So I became miserable. I couldn't sleep. I was irritable. I was angry at everything. I was dating my wife at the time. And when I say that's how long ago. So this happened on October 24th of 1995. You always say the days you never forget. 1 o'clock in the afternoon is when it happened. And a year later from that, I was still having nightmares, crying myself to sleep, not admitting what my problem was. And it came to a head one day. I was with my wife. We were driving down the road, and I got mad at some minute little thing, and I punched the windshield of my car and smashed my windshield. Not like me, out of character. My wife basically said, look, this is it. If you don't get help, I'm leaving you. If you care about me, you will get the help, and I will support you any way you can. So sure enough, this is 1995. Keep this in mind. So I said, sure, fine. I'll get help, because I'm the tough guy, being, how everybody is in the profession. I opened up the phone book and found the closest therapist I could find to my house and called them up and went in for a consultation. What are you here for? The usual blah, blah, blah. Ma'am, I don't know. My girlfriend told me to come here. Well, it was the best thing I ever did. It opened me up to, now this was early on, so this is really early technology. EMDR was very new back then, and I went through it. And for anybody that doesn't know what that is, Google it. I won't go into all the details, but it has to do with a lot of sound and feeling type sensory stuff that kind of goes into your traumatic event. Didn't know at the time, but I was facing PTSD. Didn't know what that was at the time. Never heard of it. It was taboo. But that's what I was going through. So I got a lot of support from now my wife, who we've been married for well over 20 years and been together for even longer than that. She was my rock. She was the one that made me do it. So I held on to this little thing after that. It took me about a year to get over going through EMDR. Took a while, and then some more therapy. But one day something clicked in my head, and I said, okay, I could face it. I was able to go through that intersection where I had that accident. I was able to deal with the trauma. The nightmares weren't as bad. The memories were, I was able to talk about it. I talked about it a lot, and it really helped. Talking about it really helped and opened up. So fast forward to a little bit later than that. In my career, I moved states from New York to North Carolina. Became a police officer here as well. I was in law enforcement in New York. And yes, first year on the job, I was involved in a situation where I almost shot somebody. So that really opened my eyes because I was doing really good with everything and thought I could handle stuff. Turned out I didn't have to shoot this individual. It was a 15-year-old kid with a BB gun. It was one of those that real close, real bad. Still affected me to this day. I still think about it. I could tell you exactly where I was and what I was doing and all that other stuff. So I was okay. I said, I don't need any help. So shortly after that, my wife gets pregnant, and we lose a baby to a stillborn. Our baby was stillborn. Year later, she gets pregnant with triplets. Some medication helped her get pregnant, and the babies were born early, and the 3 little girls died. They lived about an hour. So now my world went crumbling down. So now you say, okay, PTSD just could be for first responders. Now, this is my second bout of it. At this point, I knew I was in crisis. It was a bad situation. Went back to therapy with my wife, and it made us stronger. And I got through it. And I said, if I can get through this, I can get through anything. So fast forward again through my career, I've had several ups and downs. Did really good for a while. And then in 2017, I was assigned to a federal task force. And one of the roles I had to do was reopen a homicide investigation that was really complex, a lot of moving parts to it. And it was the only case in my career that I could say, everybody says they have one of those cases. Well, I had one of those cases, and it really took a toll on me mentally. I got really, really deep into the case. It went on for a long time. I was doing double duty responsibilities, buried myself in work, and really, got into crisis mode again. But I recognized it, and I have this little thing. It's up on right by my desk here, and it says "Never give up." And that's the thing I've always held with from 1995 up until now is don't ever give up and don't ever be in that same spot again. I've been in some dark places, but I refuse to allow myself to get to where I was in 1996, because it was a year after the 1995 incident. So what I did was I started learning some techniques that could help me cope with things. I didn't know what like grounding techniques are. And, if anybody doesn't know what a grounding technique is, it's just something to keep you busy and positive. Go for a walk, exercise, read a book, that kind of thing. So I started doing stuff like that. And it helped, really did. So got me through that. Now let's fast forward even again up until, 2020, 2021, 2022, pandemic hit, civil unrest. We got to see a fair share of that in my agency. The assignment I was at, didn't give me the luxury during the civil unrest to have a day off. So spent 21 days without a day off, double shifts, working double duty, seeing some bad stuff. And it really, really took a toll on me again. And I think it was the biggest challenge I went through. And this is where I decided that it's time for me to leave law enforcement and start pursuing something in the corporate world, because through all the traumas I've had, just the ones I've told you is just some of the highlights. There's a lot more. And I think anybody that's been through a career of being a first responder has been through many different traumas, probably hundreds, maybe 1,000. I don't know. But, you don't have to, God forbid, you don't have to shoot somebody. You don't have to kill somebody to have PTSD. You don't have to, because you're a detective or a patrol officer, it doesn't matter what role you're at. PTSD is a picture of many different things. It's not just one thing. You used to think, oh, if you're in the military, that's only people that got it. That's not true. So when I went through everything I went through during the civil unrest, it brought me to my breaking point. And it kind of really opened me up to really having to really do some more self-care. I'm really big into self-care. And I have a brother-in-law who recently retired from New York City Fire Department. And he was teaching a lot of mental health stuff before he retired with his agency. And he turned me on to a lot of different things. And I've never really big into reading self-help books. Now I am. He gave me my first self-help book and he said, hey, read this. And it took me a long time to read it. It really did. And once I read it, it was called The Power of Neuroplasticity. Didn't even know what in the world neuroplasticity is. Basically all that is, you rewire your brain to take negative things and make them into positives. And if you do enough positive, it will change your mind into being positive. So sure enough, this stuff works. It really does. I'm a big advocate of it. I recommend the book to everybody. I've given it to a lot of people. And that was just one of many books that I started reading about self-help. I got into breathing techniques, I call them deep belly breathes, and it calms me down in an anxious moment. All that stuff combined, meditation, the breathing, writing, I really started writing a lot, like on LinkedIn. I never thought I would. I was scared out of my mind, to open up to people. And it's the greatest thing. It's awesome therapy. Have a great support system, family, friends. I could talk to my wife, which a lot of guys, you got to get over this, or girls, talk to your spouses. If you're going through something, I know a lot of people that don't. They turn around and say, well, I don't want to burden my spouse with what I'm going through. Well, that'll destroy your relationship. It really will. So I open up to my wife, open up to my close friends. You know, if I'm having a bad day, I let them know. And that really helps. Not only that, but therapy. I've been going to therapy for a long time. That's helped tremendously. Medication, I've been on medication for a long time. You know, again, elephants in the room. Don't go to therapy. Don't go to medication. They'll take my gun away if I'm a police officer. You know, none of that happened. That's not true. You know, that's all stigmas, and we got to get over the stigma of this. And I wish I could reach out to more people and have them understand it. You know, it's tough, you know, being in the law enforcement and you don't want to admit you need help because your job is to help people. So guess what? We all need help. We fall down and someone will help you get up. And that's the biggest thing I could say. Actually, last week I had a dear friend of mine, Eric, you know, I spoke to you about this. My best friend tried to commit suicide, put a gun to his head. And it was a real eye opener. This type of guy retired from police work several years ago, happy-go-lucky guy, you know, went through the stuff like everybody else, PTSD and all that, was going to therapy, was doing great, medication, then he stopped everything. And when it stopped, you know, he hit rock bottom. Thank God he didn't commit suicide. It's been almost a week now. He's getting back on track. He's got a lot of support. He's back in therapy, back on his medication. He's on the right track. Hopefully it'll keep him to where he needs to be. But I understand, you know, when somebody's hurting and they hurt so bad. And, you know, I've had the nightmares. I've had, you know, one of the things I developed years ago and didn't realize it, I had a nervous cough when I would get very anxious. And it was really interesting, you know, because I knew it, you know, I knew what was that I had this nervous cough, and it was during like extreme anxiety. And, you know, people need to face, if they're going through crisis, that they have to, one, recognize that they need help. Number two is give a why. They need a why in life. They need to know why I need to survive, why I need to move forward, why. A lot of times, you know, somebody will say I'm worthless, nobody will miss me, all that other. Well, that's a bunch of crap, because it's not true. You know, once you start realizing the things that make you tick and make you go on and your why, you know, I'll tell you, talking about it, you know, going to therapy is a huge thing, but you have to open up to it. You have to be 100% honest with it. Don't be afraid. Oh, if I say something here, you know, that I'll be crazy, or they won't let me work, or they won't let me do. None of that. It's all confidential stuff. It has nothing to do with that. I've been going to therapy for a long time. And, you know, the other key to it is, and I want to tell people, is find the right therapist, because sometimes you go to a therapist and you just don't click. It's like everything else. If you don't click with that person, find another one, you know. Luckily, my therapist is great. I actually have an appointment in 2 days. Go once a month now, and more if I need it. And I don't admit it, and I'm not afraid to say it. I share it with a lot of people. I talk about it. You know, it's hard. I'd like to do it more in my agency, but, you know, I do it behind the scenes, because in the front lines, nobody wants to talk about it. It's still that stigma. I'm afraid. What if someone finds out? What if the hallways start talking and find out what's going on, and all that stuff? So that there's a trust factor, there's a trust issue. And I get it, you know, but the stigma is, if you need help, you better get it, because, you know, you don't want to be that guy where, you know, you get to that point where you want to put a gun to your head. That is not the place you want to be. And, you know, it's a constant battle. I tell people, you know, when you go through trauma, when you have depression and anxiety and PTSD and all that stuff, because I have it all, it's constant. It's like somebody who has an addiction. You can't just say, oh, well, I'll just stop all my stuff and I'll be fine, or I won't need to do this. It's constant self-care every day. Every day I get up, I exercise every day. It's great mentally and physically. You know, I do my breathing techniques every day. Meditation. You know, I enjoy my family. I go, even if I have to go for a walk, if I just want to, like, say, hey, I just got to go clear my head, you know, where I live out in the county, so I could go for a walk in the woods. I go in back of my property and take the trail and walk down to the stream, and just, being out there is great. Find something that you could do, something that'll help you stay busy in the right way. Because a lot of people think, oh, I'll just go to work and I'll bury myself in work. Well, I did that. That failed. Or I'll handle it on my own. Well, I did that. It failed. Or I don't need medication. Well, I tried that. That didn't work for me. Or I don't need therapy. I'll get over it myself. Well, that didn't work for me either. So it's constant stuff that you need to do, and you need people to support you. But in order for them to support you, you have to tell them what's going on. Just like anything else, you confide in people you trust. You have a trusted relative, friend, spouse, whoever it is, confide in them. Say, look, I'm having a bad day. I can't get over this. I'm proud that I could talk about this stuff now, but it still hurts. Doesn't go away. And that was my decision of why I said it's time for me to leave law enforcement. I love my job. I tell people I'm leaving on good terms. I'm not leaving, for anything other than me. And I know that if I want to continue to have a healthy mental health environment, I need to leave. I know what the triggers are when I have something that I know is going to bother me, but you can't avoid it because it involves work. I get that. And sometimes you have to work through that. And that's where, I've done it. Even to this day, I'm a detective. So people may say, well, you're not on the streets as much anymore. So what do you got to worry about? Well, sometimes there's more stress on the inside than there is on the outside. There's a lot of, things that are stressful, and there are a lot of things you still have to do that you may not want to do, in your profession.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
it's a tough one, because I've seen, people that I was close to. I had a friend a couple of years ago that I worked with, and he didn't want to talk to anybody, and he was in crisis, and he ended up turning to alcohol, and he ended up getting help. He went to some long-term treatment facility in Texas, and it actually helped him. And he went, it was in care, stuff like 6 months, and his wife stayed with him and supported him, and it was a great thing to see that he went through it. But it was sad to see that he got to that point. He didn't open himself up to anybody. He didn't let anybody in to help him. And I get it. It's tough. I struggle with it. Just like any cop, you don't want someone to help you. You're supposed to help them, like I said. And I just wish I could reach more people to say it's okay to not be okay, but don't stay there. Let someone in so they can help you. If you fall, they could help you get up. And that's the biggest thing, with all the things I've been through. Sometimes I look and say, you know what? Maybe there's people that went through worse. Maybe there has, but this is the stuff I have to deal with, and this is just a tip of the iceberg. We could spend days going through it. We all have those stories. We all have, that could have happened. It was, that could have happened. I could have got really hurt. I could have got killed, but I didn't. And you can't linger on the what ifs, and the what ifs is what's going to keep you, really, really tough in here. And, like I said, that neuroplasticity that, really, I didn't know what it was until I started getting into it. It really was a game changer, because I found the good in life. I talked to some people, especially been on the job a long time, and they said, I can't find the good in life. I deal with bad all day. It's always the bad. It's always the bad. I can't get through it. And you say, well, you got to find the good. I think, I'm very involved in my church. So faith-based stuff is very important for me. I volunteer. I'm very active with my kids and my wife, and I love being in the outdoors, and that is my relief. If it's hunting, if it's fishing, just going for a walk, going for a hike, things like that can really change, your mood. And you have to recognize if you're having something that's going on, that try and work through it. But don't be by yourself, and I just wish more people would get help. And I think it's more prevalent in law enforcement than, anybody ever realizes. I mean, you and I know it, and I think anyone in law enforcement knows it, but it's the elephant in the room. Nobody's going to talk about it. Everything is hidden because of fear, because of, I'm not good enough, that kind of thing. And I think, when I really got involved with LinkedIn, when I first talked to you about, when you redid my resume and my LinkedIn and all that, I was that cop. I didn't want to put myself out there. You got to put your picture out there. You got to put your name out there. You got to do all this stuff. And, it was just a career of, you're a cop, got to protect everything. Yeah, you got to be careful with stuff. But if it's controlled, it's fine. So I went ahead and, did everything like you told me what to do. And, I started, like I said, writing. My therapist said, hey, you should keep a journal. LinkedIn's like my journal. I'll talk about what's true to me and what's really, mental health is a big one. So I do talk about that a lot on LinkedIn. And, I'm looking for, a corporate job. So I talk a lot about job stuff. And it's a great release. And I've met a lot of good people. I mean, I went from, knowing very few people to, I'm like almost at like 1,500 connections, and they're all good connections. It's not like I'm just not going on there just picking people. And it's great. And it's awesome when I'll write about something with mental health and I'll have people send a private message to me, another cop that says, hey man, thank you. I appreciate, I needed that. And I'm like, holy crap. I didn't think that, I was doing it to help people, but you never realize that they're going to reach out to you, because,
Absolutely.
you're not going to do it. But I've had quite a few people reach out to me and really, really said it was an inspiration to hear some of those stories and they're not alone what they're going through. And it was great. It was great to hear.
As we approach the end of our time, I just wanted to say, like, thanks for sharing. Thanks for being transparent. For so long, the stigma of mental health was seen as a weakness. It was seen as a negative. It was seen as, hey, if you admit that you have this, there's something wrong with you. And just like you alluded to in your memories, it was used to take people's guns away, take their badge away. Because they were vulnerable enough to say, hey, I have an issue that I can't solve on my own. And that's the one thing I wanted to like really address with you in our final few minutes is, with the stigma that is surrounding mental health and talking about our issues and our hidden or invisible trauma, if you will. How has your struggles with mental health made you a better husband, made you a better leader, made you a better individual? How has it enhanced your character or how you think about the world and how you interact with people? Let's turn this around and instead of making it a stigma, let's talk about how it really enables us to live with a more empathetic mindset toward others and the struggles that we all have. So how has that really impacted you for the better?
Yeah. So, I'm glad you brought up the empathetic part of it because that's a huge part, and early on in my career, I never realized it. But after, I started going through this, being empathetic to people, understanding what they're going through, live through their eyes for a little bit and see what they're going through and understand it, and that's huge. And listening to people, you have to listen. And, early on, you don't want to do that. But as I went on in my career, I realized listening to people, what are they really saying? Not just what do you want to hear them saying? What are they really saying and how can you get to them? And that was huge. That was one of the hugest things, not only in my professional life, but in my personal life. So with my family, with my wife, I understood how to open up and how to communicate, how to be a really good, effective communicator. Not just, how was your day? Okay, well, what does that show? Nothing. Did you have a good day or a bad day? So I do this with my kids every day. A lot of times I get up early to go to work. I get up 5 a.m. and, I have some crazy kids and they want to get up with me most days at 5 a.m., which they don't have to get up that early to go to school. But they'll get up with me and we'll always have a conversation, hey, how'd your night go? Did you sleep okay? what are you going to do today? How's your day going to go? And then when they come home from school, how was your day? Not just, a lot of times you see people, hey man, how you doing? No, this is really, how are you doing? How was your day? Tell me about it, and my youngest daughter today, she didn't have a good day at school. She got into a little argument with one of the other students, and, we talked about it and we worked it out. And she went from, sobbing uncontrollably when I picked her up from school to, at the end, I was empathetic and I said, I'm going to listen. I'm going to see what's going on. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's just a little, issue that she's had with someone else, but to her, it's a major problem right now. So once I identified that, we worked on it. I tell my kids, they use my same coping skills, have them do breathing techniques. I do all that with them, and it's great and it helps them. And then, 30 minutes later, she's doing her homework and she's smiling and, she's in a different place. And it's just because she's able to work through it, and I think with anybody, whether it's professional or personal, being able to work through your situation, tell somebody, if they're doing a good job. If they're not, give them constructive criticism, but not in a bad way. Communicate. A lot of times you could solve most of the problems with good communication. And I think, it's taught me a lot with that, because it taught me how to open up myself and how I can be vulnerable. And no one likes to be vulnerable, especially cops. So I've learned how to be vulnerable. I did it on LinkedIn. The last post I did, I told my wife, I said, I'm terrified about this. And it's silly because all it was just kind of saying, this is what I've done. This is how I've accomplished it. It's just it's a business type thing. But I did it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm proud of, of where I'm getting to. And it's a work in progress, and just to do this right now, talking to you is a huge thing for me.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
want to help people with this. There's no strings at all. And I love it. And I hope that, someone could listen to what I've gone through and say, look, I'm not alone. You hate to say this term, but misery likes friends. You don't want to use it in a bad thing. We say, hey, look, that guy went through, something like me, and he got through it. Maybe I could get through it. He went to counseling. Maybe I could try it, and he's still working. So he didn't, anything that would click with somebody, I would hope that it would resonate with them and bring them to a good place. Because, I always say, there's a term I sent my buddy who tried to hurt himself last week. And it's a YouTube thing with Jocko. It's about good, the word good. And, if you're going through something and it's bad, well, good. Well, it's good because good will come out of it at some point. It may not be good now, but it will be good. And I think if you could say good, you'll be okay. And it's just something that stuck with me. And, I'm kind of really big on, another thing that I forgot to bring up is music. Music is a great release for me. When I leave work, I put it on in the car. When I'm at my desk, I'll put it on. When I get in the shower, I play music. It's a positive for everybody, and it's just positive music, though. But what I stress is positive music. Don't listen to stuff that's going to get you down. Listen to stuff that give you a little motivation. I try and do like a daily motivation of positive, every day, and just look at it, and whatever it is, just let me start my day off positive, and then end it positive. So,
yeah, I really appreciate that. I tell people a lot, and I've done a lot of these podcasts over the years where I've specifically called out, mental health and it's on the impact on my life, but also the good that has come out of it as well. And, it's always easier to see the good after the fact, than when you're going through it. And that's true for a lot of situations in our life, but what I tell people is, your story is unique, but the trauma that you're experiencing is not. One of the excuses that I hear a lot is, well, that's different from my story, or that's not the same. And I agree. I mean, everyone's story is unique and relevant and directly, unique to them. But the scars and the struggles that we have, the anxiety, the depression, the PTSD, as you referenced, the issues that we have, whether they're medical, whether they're psychological, whether they're physical in nature, they all impact us in different ways, and recognizing that, hey, this isn't going away, and what I'm doing to deal with it, if any, isn't helping. I've talked a lot about it over the years that I had, physical issues that came out of my own anxiety. I had sleep apnea. I had, gallstones that caused significant issues with chronic pain for a number of years. And, you also mentioned triggers, like we all know what our triggers are. I can't watch cop shows anymore. I start getting anxious. I start, having sweats. I start, reliving some of the memories that I had. And, now that we've moved back to Houston, there are certain parts of the city I can't go to, just because I automatically am just awash in memories that I would rather not relive. Yep. Same with people that you interact with. There are certain members of my former law enforcement family that I just can't be around, and I tell people, like, moving on in a healthy way requires you to comprehensively evaluate all of your triggers and everything that impacts your life, and really ask yourself, can I change this, and what do I need to change it, and it's really a whole life assessment, because our mental health impacts every single aspect of what we do day in and day out. It impacts our relationships, our professional attitude in the workplace, how we are with our family and our friends, and, the support system that you alluded to as well is so important. One of the things that I deeply, deeply appreciated about LinkedIn over the past 10 or so years that I've been really, really intentional about it is the community that we have here. Probably 95% of the people that I talk to on a regular basis, I've never met in person, but we have shared experiences. We have relationships that we've built through intentional and authentic community. And, a lot of those individuals share similar experiences. And so I know that if it came down to it, I could reach out to them. We could have a conversation much like we're having now. And, I would have someone that understands where I'm coming from and understands, that what I'm experiencing isn't a negative, but that it's a part of being human, and it's a part of recognizing that we can only experience growth when we're actually vulnerable, not only with ourselves, but vulnerable with others, so, I really appreciate, your vulnerability and your transparency. It's not easy to talk about. It's not easy to, quote unquote, expose yourself to other people's opinions or other people's thoughts. And, it's not easy to even, ponder the fact that potential employers may see this and say, well, I don't want that guy in my workplace. He's full of holes,
Yeah.
But in reality, you're exactly the type of guy that I want in my workplace. I want someone who is empathetic. I want someone who, builds relationships and can understand that it's okay to not be okay. We're all imperfect human beings, whether you're faith-based or not, whether you believe in a God or not. And understanding that and having that mentality will enable us not only to be better husbands and fathers and leaders, but also just better people to interact with our fellow man. So in closing, are there any final thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
Well, and I hit on so many topics and so many things, but the biggest thing is, and I'm going to stress this again, is people need to find the good in the world, especially in the career of law enforcement. There's so much bad that you see. You have to find the good. You have to force yourself. Some of the things I get the most satisfaction out of are things that I volunteer for, because it's all good stuff. I volunteer at my church with the youth ministry, and seeing the kids doing what kids do in a positive environment is huge, and it has such an impact on my mental health. I can't even tell you. It's one of those things that, you can't put a price tag on it. You have to find that good, but you also need to come to terms with yourself and say, I want the help, and I'm going to get the help, and I'm not going to fail at it. I'm going to work at it. You work at it just like if you're trying to get a job, or you go to the gym and you want to lose weight, or you think you want to go on a diet. You have to work at it. Mental health, you have to work 10 times harder than all of that. But if you want to do it, you'll do it. And you have to have the mindset, and it starts up here. And you really, really need to do it with a positive mind. And just be empathetic to people. Listen to them. Yeah, we all have different stories, kind of like what you said. But in our heads, the same thing is going on. We're facing the same things. It's just different images we have. But be empathetic to that person who's having a tough time, and help them up, and listen to them, and see what kind of resources you can give him or her. It's huge. And I think it'll pay off in the long run. And that it goes even in the corporate world. When I transition to that, PTSD hides in all different kinds of places. It doesn't hide just in military and first responders. There's plenty of other people out there that go through things, even if it's not PTSD, it's anxiety, it's depression, whatever it may be, a dependency thing. You got to be open to that stuff, and you have to be willing to adapt.
Absolutely.
So that's most I could say about it. And it sounds easier than it is, but it to me, that's the secret sauce that worked for me. All this stuff had worked for me, and I sustained it for a long time. I could say, oh, you did something for here or there. It takes a couple of weeks, takes 3 weeks to get something into habit, and it takes a year to really run with, all that stuff. I've been doing this stuff for years, and it's really worked, and I keep building on it. I always tell myself, I reevaluate and I add stuff to my toolbox. Just like as a first responder, you have things to keep you safe and investigative stuff. Well, mental health is the same type of principle, is that you have a toolbox, keep adding stuff to it. Don't just keep doing one thing and think it's going to be okay, or just keep adding stuff, change it up, listen to people, read books, podcasts, all that stuff. Listen to what other people are doing and try it. If it works, great. If not, then that's okay. Try something else.
Absolutely.
So, I wish we didn't have this conversation in a way to where, this wasn't, a big problem in law enforcement, but it is. It's probably, I posted something on LinkedIn, and it's a true statement. There are more law enforcement officers that die by their own hands than gunfire. There's more police officers that commit suicide every year than get killed in line of duty with gunfire. That is something that's got to change. And I think awareness is a big part of it, and looking out for each other. We have to look out for each other, and that goes for family members, coworkers, friends, whoever. We just have to do a better job of recognizing, when someone's in crisis, and getting them help is the key.
Absolutely. Yeah. The trauma affects us all, no matter what our profession, but it especially affects us, those who are in law enforcement, the ones who are former law enforcement. It particularly affects our profession for sure, based upon what we see and what we are exposed to on a daily basis. So,
absolutely,
Dennis, really want to appreciate you for, again, your vulnerability and your transparency. Thank you just for sharing your heart with us. And, I can tell you that it's helped at least one person already, and that's myself. Because the more that I talk about this, the more it helps my own mental health. So I have no doubt that it'll help many more people than just me. But thank you, and we'll chat soon,
welcome,
brother.
All right.
Thank you.
Eric, take care. Okay.
You too. Bye.
Bye.